Welcome to the show. I'm Antisocial. And this is the Antisocial Network.
I want to talk to her, but my face is up against the wall. Yeah, I think she wants to talk to me, but I'm antisociable. Yeah.
This week, I'm telling you all about the time I almost died, and doctors called me crazy. Thanks for tuning in! Today I'm going to start out with a little disclaimer/trigger warning. Though most of my episodes are heavily research-based, this week I'm doing something slightly different, and I'm going to talk about my lived experience as a woman trying to navigate the healthcare system. Fair warning, I'm going to talk about bodily fluids and functions, gynecological issues, vomiting, and butt stuff. I'm also going to talk about gaslighting doctors, misogyny in healthcare, not being taken seriously, trying to get help when you're poor and no one wants to help you, and the crushing loneliness of attempting to advocate for yourself when the odds are stacked against you. Additionally, I'm getting burnt out writing and researching dense topics every week while also trying to figure out how I'm going to make money and survive. Until my podcast blows up in popularity, or some angel investor shows up, or I find a job in content creation, I'm stuck trying to eke out a living like everybody else. That said, I think I'm going to try to start incorporating more personal stories sprinkled throughout my research-based content. This will give me a little break and give you, the listener, a better insight into who I am. And if you like what you hear, you can find more personal stories and long-form stream of consciousness content on my Patreon, where the vibe is more relaxed and I just shoot the shit. Now, okay, so before I begin, again, I'm reminding you that I'll be talking about poop and pee and criminal negligence and malpractice and all sorts of things that could be triggering for some people. Listener discretion is advised. I have all the documents filed away somewhere, and I could dig them out and make sure everything is exactly correct, and the timeline of events is perfect and nothing is left out. But I don't feel like doing research, so I'm just going to write from memory and you'll all have to believe me. If any malpractice attorneys want to reach out to me, though, I assure you I can back up everything I say here with paperwork. Anyway, I believe it was September of 2017. I think? I'd been experiencing some really bad inflammation and gut issues for a while, like vomiting regularly, and had terrible skin lesions when I had always had no problem with my complexion. I had also had a dull ache in my left side, on and off for going on a year. You know when you get a stitch in your side from running, or when you pull a muscle and feel a slight strain? It was like that. Not piercing or particularly gut-wrenching, and not like period cramps or anything, but a constant dull ache in my side that was basically always there. I have always had an extremely regular period, and I even use an app to track it on my phone. And I mean extremely regular, to the point of predictability within a day. So, when I started bleeding exactly 14 days after my last period, I thought it was odd. But, of course, I know periods can be irregular, and heck, I was in my early 30s, so who knows what was going on. Maybe this was just an off month. But as I continued to bleed non-stop for 3 days, filling up a Diva cup to overflowing several times a day, I knew something wasn't right. On the 4th day of this, I had changed my Diva cup right before going on an errand that should have taken me an hour. By the time I got to the store, I looked down at my lap in the car and realized I had bled through my pants. I was horrified. Never before had this happened to me on even my heaviest of flow days, and I knew something wasn't right. Thanks to Obama, I was legally required to get insurance and was poor enough to qualify for Medi-Cal, but had never used it or even picked a GP. But I decided I would go to an OBGYN the next day. Turns out I would end up in the emergency room before that would happen. That night, still bleeding excessively for 4 days straight now, I was sitting on my floor trying to get some transcribing done. I stood up to go to the bathroom and felt immediately very faint. I tried to walk it off, and when it didn't stop, I sat on my bed. Frightened, I called my mother, not sure what to do. While explaining to her how I was feeling, I was suddenly struck with the urgency of my situation, and I told her, I'm hanging up and dialing 911. I stood up to go look at myself in the bathroom mirror while I called for help, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up on the bathroom floor. Alarmed, I realized I must have passed out. I looked around for my phone and didn't see it on the ground. Confused, I stood up and located my phone in the bathroom sink. The 9 had been dialed. I was immediately grateful that I had not struck my head on the counter or the toilet on my way to the ground. I sat back down on the floor because I was so weak, and I dialed 911. Completely out of it and very slow and deliberate, with my eyes closed like I had to concentrate on what I was saying, I asked for an ambulance and relayed my address. When dispatch asked if my front door was locked and I said that it was, she told me I would have to unlock it, explaining that the paramedics could let themselves into my building, but not my apartment. I was completely daunted by this information and resolved myself to get to my front door, but I knew it would be difficult for me. I was naked from the waist down since I hadn't put pants back on after going to the bathroom when I felt faint, and remember grabbing a pair of shorts off my bedroom floor. I then army crawled on my stomach, pulling myself through my apartment to my front door with my forearms, clutching the shorts to my chest. Suddenly I heard the dispatcher yelling, "What happened? What happened?" I came to, and I realized I must have lost consciousness again. I had only made it halfway through my living room. I said to the operator matter-of-factly, "Oh, sorry, I must have passed out again." And I remember her saying, "That's okay," without a hint of concern in her voice. I then continued to crawl towards my front door, which was wide open, but my metal security screen was deadbolted. I could see out and across the way to the apartment building next door, where my neighbors adjacent to me had their front door wide open. Inside, I could see lights blaring and several people standing around, apparently having a party or gathering. I knew that if I could see them, they could clearly see me, lying on my floor, pantsless and semi-conscious. I reached my door, hoisted myself up from the floor using the doorknob for leverage, unlocked the deadbolt, then collapsed to the floor again. Using what little energy I could muster, I laid on my back and pulled the shorts I had in my hands up my legs. Then I passed out again until the paramedics were at my door. When they burst in, they immediately started taking my vitals. One asked me if I was always this pale. Another asked if I had spilled water all over myself. Confused by the question, I realized I had collapsed on the floor next to my cat's food and water dishes. Noticing that the water was still full and none had spilled, I answered her like she was stupid and said, "No, that's my sweat." Apparently, I had broken out in such a sweat that I was completely drenched. Becoming more aware of my surroundings now, I grew embarrassed. The EMTs told me it would be difficult to carry me out on a stretcher down the staircase and asked me if I thought I could make it down to the ambulance on my own. Mortified and not wanting to fucking inconvenience the paramedics, I feebly hobbled to my bedroom to get a proper pair of pants and somehow had the foresight to grab my phone charger. Now that you're on the edge of your seats, let's cut to break. Hello, comrades! If you often get accused of hostile militant behavior when you're just trying to get to work, we may have the answer for you. Soup for Your Family is the perfect solution to ward off fascists, bootlickers, and their sympathizers. If you are constantly harassed and bullied by the state while merely trying to fight for the rights of the proletariat, we see you. Soup for Your Family is a great way to not only feed your family, but it serves as a silent signal to like-minded comrades that you stand with them in the fight against fascism. Whether you're eating it or throwing it in an act of solidarity, Soup for Your Family will never let you down. Do you know what the difference between you and Cardi B is? Do you wonder why you haven't achieved the fame of a Kardashian and agonize over why you don't get the respect you deserve? Most influencers don't realize they are missing a key ingredient when it comes to success: fancy bags. Here at Fancy Bags, you don't need money in your actual purse because you've spent all your money on the bag itself. Who needs money when your shoulder sack can say everything for you? Don't be held back by lesser, inferior bags and start your new life today with Fancy Bags. Bags start at just $16,000 and can be financed for as low as $4.99 a month. Call now! And welcome back. That night in the ER, I had a full gamut of tests run. I'm pretty sure that was the first EKG I've ever gotten, or at least that I can remember anyway. I got countless blood labs and an ultrasound. At least I think I got an ultrasound that night. It would have been negligent not to give me one after all that bleeding and the chronic dull ache in my side I'd been having since the previous summer. I entered the ER around 11 or midnight that night, and it wasn't until after 4 a.m. that a doctor finally came in to give me any information. Nothing was wrong with me, she said. All my tests came back fine. I was vitamin D deficient, but according to her, quote, not even a little anemic. I was insistent. I knew this wasn't right. What the fuck? I almost just died. Right? I had no history of fainting and had been bleeding through my pants for days. Desperate for more answers, I began rapid fire throwing out other symptoms I'd been having. When I mentioned having wild mood swings, she stopped me and said, wait, let me check one more thing, and ran a thyroid test. About an hour later, she came back and said, yep, your thyroid numbers are off the charts. My TSH number was well over 10, when apparently normal readings are between 0.5 and 5. Mine was more than double the high range. To top it off, she heaved a heavy sigh and, knowing something I did not quite yet know, said to me, good luck getting a diagnosis for this. Flabbergasted and a bit taken aback, I asked her if she could be my doctor, and she said, no, that's not how it works. I'm an ER physician. I left the ER at 5 a.m. in a cab when it was still dark. To add insult to injury, when I got home, something the paramedics did when they entered the apartment complex had permanently locked the door to my building and my key didn't work. Not giving a flying fuck about my safety, the cab driver had driven off the second I got out of his car, and I was left to climb the side gate of my building, having just been discharged from the emergency room for losing consciousness. The next day, I called my healthcare provider and found a GP in my network nearby. I insisted on a woman, and I liked her well enough when I met her. However, she would not take my ER results from the previous night at face value. She said that she needed to run all the tests again, and we'd go from there. Oh, how the doctor in the ER the night before, sighing deeply and telling me good luck, had been some Hollywood-level foreshadowing. This would begin my several-year battle for a diagnosis, of which I still do not have to this day. You see, because my health insurance is garbage, apparently it takes 8 to 12 weeks to get an appointment with any specialists. The doctor put me on a vitamin D supplement right away, but my initial labs did not come back abnormal. Based off my night in the ER, however, I was referred to an endocrinologist, a doctor who specializes in thyroid functionality. I was also sent to an OBGYN to investigate the abnormal bleeding and chronic abdominal pain. More ultrasounds were ordered at the gynecologist. More blood tests were ordered by the endocrinologist. When I went in to see the endo, I never actually saw the doctor, just a nurse practitioner. But she listened to my story about the ER, took one look at my neck, and said, oh, you have a thyroid problem for sure. That right there is a goiter, pointing at the lump in my throat. Then she held a hand mirror up to me and taught me how to feel the giant lump in my neck that was visible to the eye and that I could feel when I was swelling up and when I was experiencing that inflammation I talked about earlier. It sort of feels like when you're going to cry and you have a lump in your throat, or when you can't quite swallow something like a piece of bread that's too big and dry. Only you feel that way all the time, like your throat is closing up. Confident in her confidence, I went for the labs she ordered and was certain I was on my way to a diagnosis. But after 2 to 3 months, or however fucking long it was to get the labs ordered and get scheduled for a follow-up appointment, I was told definitively by this same nurse practitioner that I most definitely did not have a thyroid problem. I reminded her of the ER labs and said that last time I was in, she pointed out the giant goiter in my neck and taught me how to feel for it. But you told me last time I was here that I definitely did have a thyroid problem, I protested. She shrugged and said, labs are labs. You don't have a thyroid problem. Meanwhile, I had seen 3 different gynecologists who wouldn't do anything more than give me a pap smear. I swear to God I had to start strong-arming these OBs into not giving me another fucking pap. I've had 2 in the past 3 months, I'd find myself saying, quite frustrated that they didn't review any of the paperwork I had gone through the trouble of organizing and bringing to all my appointments, or at the very least, listen to the words coming out of my mouth. Months were passing and I was getting sent to every possible specialist while my symptoms continued and worsened and I got nowhere. I was having terrible adrenal fatigue, sleeping 16 hours a day for weeks on end. Labs revealed that I had recently recovered from another bout of mono, which at this point I had had 3 times knowingly in my life. At my wit's end, I was researching constantly, aware that my cacophony of symptoms were the telltale signs of textbook autoimmune diseases. The fact that my symptoms were episodic and flare-ups would come and go was all standard issue for people suffering from chronic illnesses such as Crohn's, celiac, thyroid dysfunction, Hashimoto's, Epstein-Barr, Graves' disease, lupus, and PCOS. I became convinced I was suffering from one of these while doctors treated me like a hypochondriac with too much access to WebMD. The fact that my symptoms were not being revealed in all the tests was as frustrating as taking your car to the mechanic, but every time you do, your car won't do the thing that's wrong with it. At some point, though, it would have been nice to have been heard and have my symptoms taken seriously, instead of relying so heavily on labs that really only served as a comparison to other people's bodies anyway. Who cares what the labs said if I was insisting I was experiencing these symptoms? Eventually, I would end up in the ER 3 more times through this ordeal. One time taking an ambulance because I had 2 giant lumps on either side of my throat, the actual size of golf balls. Having seen the endocrinologist and already passed out once before, I was horrified, felt faint, and didn't think I could drive. The EMT who took my vitals rolled her eyes at me the entire time, acting completely inconvenienced and like I was some prima donna drama queen. Through all of this, in addition to the endocrinologist and several gynecologists, I also saw a neurologist, had a CT scan and an MRI, swallowed a pill with a camera in it while I had a belt with electrodes hooked up to my stomach for 24 hours, saw a specialist for lupus, a urologist, saw a gastrointestinal doctor who gave me 2 colonoscopies and an endoscopy, and I'm honestly sure there's more I can't remember right now. My MRI showed no problem with my pituitary, which they were investigating for my thyroid, but the CT scan showed some apparent cloudiness around my left side, where the chronic ache I'd been having was. The follow-up for which was a colonoscopy that was only performed 2 months later, and by the time it was, apparently nothing appeared to be wrong. I was discharged after my second colonoscopy with paperwork that said I wouldn't need another one for 15 years. By now, the dull ache had often turned into debilitating pain. Sometimes my entire core would feel so inflamed I felt like my whole insides were vibrating with heat and discomfort. I began to worry I had an ulcer or a hernia, or that maybe my gallbladder would burst. Some days I'd wake up in so much pain and bloating in my core that I could barely twist my body around to wipe my own ass. I was having diarrhea or throwing up nearly every day, some days several times a day. At a loss, I began trying every food elimination diet I could, convinced it was a gluten allergy or dairy or something else I could control. The cloudy CT scan had led to 2 colonoscopies that apparently showed nothing wrong. Ultrasounds showed I had fibroids and an ovarian cyst on my left side, the same side as my chronic pain. Yet, gynecologists and my GP insisted these were normal, not a size to be concerned about, often come and go, and many women live with them. Doctors wanted to tell me my constant fatigue and weight gain was just lifestyle changes and that I should eat less and move more. I knew that I was always an active person and what it took for me to lose weight or feel fit, and I'd also had mono several times before, so I knew the difference between chronic fatigue and pure laziness. Yet, professionals kept insisting that nothing was wrong with me, and I started to buy into the narrative that maybe I just needed to be more positive or do more stairs or something. Despite the fact that the night I had nearly bled out and lost consciousness, I had been skating an hour each day for a couple months straight. I even went skating the night I went to the ER, in between bleeding through my pants and passing out later. I also had to pee constantly. No matter what I did, how little water I drank, or how often I went to the bathroom, I constantly felt like I had to pee. Instinctively, I knew this is what it must be like for pregnant women, because when having flare-ups or inflammation episodes, it was like something was pushing on my bladder and wouldn't give me any relief. Honestly, by now, relaying all this is stressing me the fuck out, and it feels like it's getting convoluted and confusing and just too long. In fact, fuck it. Let's stop right here. I have a whole other podcast episode left in me to finish this saga, and I don't want this episode to be 40 minutes, so let's stick a pin in this and do a part 2 next week. Thanks for listening. That's my show for this week. I'm Antisocial, and this is the Antisocial Network. If you want even more access to me, Antisocial, follow me on Instagram at The Antisocial Network. To support my content creation dreams and to receive 2 bonus episodes a month, subscribe to my Patreon for only $5 at patreon.com/The Antisocial Network. And for a limited time, new patrons will receive Antisocial Network stickers and a top-secret handmade zine made by me, Antisocial. To send me voice memos or to submit your own funny fake ad that I might use in my podcast, download the Anchor app and find my show there. As always, new episodes are available in the free feed every week. See you next Wednesday. Later!
I think I'm a nice guy, but I'm antisociable, yeah.